Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video, I'm going to be showcasing the best team that I've found for climbing ELO during this final week of the season. Now this is going to be a Great League team. I've been playing a ton of Great League the past week, testing out a wide variety of Pokemon and teams, and this team has far and away been the most consistent. On the lead, I have Voltage Fortress, and in the back, I have two Pokemon that can interchangeably be used as a safe switch or a closer. Shadow Sableye and Shadow Celio, two Pokemon that are absolute nightmares to deal with when you give them just a little bit of energy advantage. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and in game number 1, we pick up a pretty decent lead, leading Voltage Fortress into Carbink. My backline is not a big fan of Carbink, so I am pretty happy to see it here. Ideally, I would love to try and soft lose his matchup, and then set up a pretty nasty Shadow Claw down, because teams that lead Carbink are usually very weak to Sableye energy in the back. I am now running what has become the standard moveset on Shadow Sableye, Drain Punch, which feels a little bit crazy to say considering at the start of the season Drain Punch was a complete meme, but people have seen the light. Drain Punch is very good. Here I actually elect not to throw the Sand Tomb because I just want to set up a massive farm down for the Shadow Sableye. Carbink is very heavily debuffed. They realize they cannot give an energy head start, and they're going to pivot out into a Shadow Bug Bite Fortress. I'm going to build up to the foul play, bait with the Drain Punch, and get the shield to boost up my defense. These bug bites are inflicting some serious damage on the Sableye, so whatever help that I can get with withstanding the bug bites will be very much appreciated. I did Drain Punch bait the first time, but now I'm looking for damage. Foul play connects, opponent tries to call the Drain Punch. Can I get the farm down here? No, I cannot. I think I would have been bug bitten down. So I save a move on Sableye and send in the Celio. But now Celio is going to be absolutely shredded by the rock throws. Carbink is still too healthy where I cannot knock out with the Body Slam, so I fire off the Surf and grab the final shield. With shields down, this still feels like a pretty tough game to win. They fire off the Rock Slide. In the back, they have a Gourgeist. And wait, this might actually be winnable. I fire off the Surf. My switch timer should now be up. They have the Seed Bomb. I can switch Sableye, get the CMP Sack Swap, but I don't want to knock them out. Instead, I go for the Undercharge, because I don't need to knock out the Gourgeist. All I need to do is put them into 2 Powder Snow range. This ensures that I'm going to get a ton of energy with Celio, take no damage. Now I can outpace the Carbink. Opponent sees the writing on the wall and concedes the match. We move to game number 2, leading Voltage Fortress into Feraligatr. Now, I'd like to say this is a good lead, but the non-Shadow Feraligatr does actually win the zeros. That's a pretty big problem because a lot of Feraligatr lead teams are ABA weak to the Fortress, but they can always stay in and either force a shield advantage or switch advantage, and then whatever they have in the back will probably sweep me. So I'm just going to opt out. After landing the Rock Tomb, I catch the Hydro Cannon onto the Shadow Celio, and now I can look for the Powder Snow down. My opponent's going to pivot out, they send in Shadow Primate, but this is not an answer to a Shadow Celio. Shadow Celio, when it's up a little bit of energy, can make life so uncomfortable for Shadow Primate. Shadow Primate's going to go for the CMP tie. My question is this going to be enough to secure the knockout? Rage Fist barely does take the KO, but look how much damage they just took from Powder Snow. Now I can bring in the Sableye. I'm going to try and go for the 1 shield farm down. If my opponent makes another Rage Fist, I will have the ability to go for a catch. They do make the Rage Fist, but I saved that Fortress from earlier for this exact purpose. I catch the Rage Fist. Now I can bring back in the Sableye. Sableye gets the farm down in the back. It's an Aegislash, and this game is over. There is just nothing my opponent can do. Sableye's up too much energy. Foul play shreds through the Aegislash. And now I can just close out the game straight Drain Punch. Even if my opponent ends up calling this, I can just boost myself to the point where a Shadow Ball will not KO. Now, I can just look to overfarm, take the knockout with the foul play, and I believe the only thing my opponent has left is 1 HP of Gator in the back. In comes Gator, they fall to the Shadow Claw, and we take the win. We move to the next game, picking up a terrible lead Fortress into Gourgeist. This is a rare HomeSliceHenry team that is not ABA weak to Gourgeist. I save switch into Celio, my opponent responds with a Blastoise, and we are off to a pretty rough start. Blastoise is not a Pokemon I see a lot in the Open Great League, but oh my goodness is it bulky. Blastoise shrugged off that Body Slam like it was nothing. I go for a second Body Slam. Blastoise still somehow not in the red HP, and this Blastoise is a very serious problem. I shield up trying to call the Skull Bash, but unfortunately they just went for the Hydro Cannon, and a bad situation gets even worse. I so desperately need to try and make a play for switch advantage here because I cannot afford to have Fortress on the Gourgeist. This time Blastoise will go for the Skull Bash. I'm going to farm up, fire off the Body Slam, and Body Slam, even despite the defense boost, should be enough to secure the knockout. Body Slam is going to land. Will they bring back in the Gourgeist? They're going to take a lot of damage if they do. They do not. Instead, they bring in Carbink. Carbink is going to get shredded by Surf, and by winning switch advantage, I put myself in a spot where I should be able to win this game. My opponent pivots into the Gourgeist. I send in the Sableye. It's a race to the move, and I'm able to make the Drain Punch. Drain Punch is double resisted, but my opponent has to respect the foul play. Now I've boosted up my defense, and this means that my opponent cannot afford to go for a Seed Bomb. They're going to be forced to full set the Shadow Ball. Shadow Ball lands, down goes Sableye. I still have the Celio, and after throwing one Powder Snow, I have the Body Slam. This is double resisted. Will it KO? Body Slam knocks out the Gourgeist. Back in comes the Carbink, but I still have a full HP Fortress. There's just no path forward, and even despite the Nightmare lead, we're able to claw our way back and get the win. We move to the next match, seeing a pretty familiar lead, Fortress and Feraligatr, but this time it's the Shadow Feraligatr. Shadow Feraligatr is a way better matchup for Fortress, because when I fire off the Rock Tomb will actually pick up the knockout. I decide to shield the first, because this way, unless my opponent shields back, I basically still have a full HP Fortress. My opponent's going to send in Altaria. I'm going to farm up and fire off the Rock Tomb right before they're able to make a move. Ideally, I would love to pivot out, so after I get the debuff, I just send in the Sableye, and my opponent sends out a Shadow Empoleon. Shadow Empoleon is really not going to like what happens next. I get to fire off the Drain Punch, boost up my defense, and even though Shadow Hydro Cannon normally does a ton of damage, the fact that I've boosted up my defense, I think I can actually survive. Hydro Cannon lands. Oh no, I can't survive. I stand corrected. Oh my goodness, I was very, very wrong, but luckily, it should not matter. I'm just going to shield so the Volt Switch can land and immediately undertap the Sand Tomb. I had hoped there. The Shadow Sableye is a pretty good IV, but unfortunately, Sableye was not able to hang on. I just get to stay in with the Fortress to force energy, and then get to Powder Snow down with the Celio. Maybe I was a little too ambitious there with hoping Celio would survive. A regular Hydro Cannon wouldn't have been a problem, but Shadow Empoleon Hydro Cannon was a bit too much for Sableye to deal with. We move to the next match, picking up a lead that is honestly not as good as I might like. Leading the Volt Switch Fortress into the Tinkaton. Tinkaton fires off Gigaton Hammer. That just does so much resistant damage. And now I get to start chipping away with Sand Tombs. The reason why I didn't throw the first Sand Tomb right away is I didn't want my opponent just to tank the energy and then end up pivoting out with an entire Gigaton in reserve. I would much rather they commit to the matchup, because if they do that, then I feel like I'm in a lot better of a spot. My opponent sends in Furret, and this is a bit of a problem Pokemon for this team, especially if they're on Trailblaze. I don't have a strong answer to a Trailblaze Furret once I've taken a lot of damage on my Fortress. I send it the Sableye because I do have access to Drain Punch, but things are still honestly not looking the best. My hope, however, is if I can get a big farm down with the Shadow Celio. I feel like usually when I see this team, the third is Mandibuzz. And if it's Mandibuzz, then my Shadow Celio should be able to put in a good amount of work. So I'm going to shield once as they go for the double boosted Swift, get a full farm down, now I get to exit with a ton of energy. My opponent sends in Tinkaton. This is very close to a range where Surf may or may not take the knockout. Surf will be shielded. It's going to be a charge type priority tie. I'm going to be putting up the shield, and my opponent will full send Gigaton Hammer. They're going to look to overfarm, so am I. I'm going to try and CMP tie to the Bulldoze. There's the catch onto the Mandibuzz, but this is the move I still needed to throw on the Mandibuzz, so I still feel like I'm in an okay spot. I'm able to bank the Surf, pivot into the Fortress, and make it to the Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb not going to knock out here, but importantly, will apply an attack drop. Add to that the fact that they can never farm down. They're going to be forced to fire off energy here. Foul play will knock out the Fortress. I send in the Celio, and unfortunately, I just have to hope that Celio can survive this Shadow Ball. Mandibuzz fires off the Shadow Ball. I undertap predicting the switch. They tried to go for the Bulldoze, but we win the CMP tie, take the knockout with the Surf. In comes Mandibuzz. We get the Powder Snow down. That game got way closer than it ever should have been, but luckily, we're able to get the win. We pick up a bit of a scary lead in the next match, leading Volt Switch Fortress into Shadow Sableye. I would say probably the Pokemon that gave me the most trouble with this team was opposing Sableye. Sableye is now pretty common because people are realizing just how strong it is with Drain Punch, and a Sableye at advantage can completely run away with the game. I'm going to try and make it to the Sand Tomb. Unfortunately, my opponent not going to let me get there, and now I have to decide. Do I want Sableye farm, or do I want Celio farm? I decide that I want Celio farm. My opponent's going to pivot into Licky Licky, and I'm going to actually send in the Shadow Sableye. As long as I shield up the first Shadow Ball, then I can boost up my defense a ton with Drain Punch and then just make life really uncomfortable for the Licky Licky. Add to that the fact that their Sableye is realistically never making another move, then I feel like I should hopefully be in a pretty good spot. I did get a Powder Snow or two before switching, and that does help this matchup quite a bit, because now I think I can actually knock out with the Foul Play. Foul Play is neutral, but it does do slightly more damage than a super effective Drain Punch, so I go for the Foul Play, they put up the shield, they pivot out, and in the back, they have Quagsire. I just need damage on this Pokemon, so I fire off the Foul Play, they let it go, and I pivot into the Celio. This can only be a mud bomb, so I'm definitely not going to be using a shield here. Instead, I'm just going to look to overfarm with the Celio, and I decide that I could have overfarmed one more, so I decide to go for an undercharge. I'm hoping to leave them close to 1 HP. It is 1 Powder Snow range. Now I exit with extra energy. My opponent has so much energy stored on the Licky Licky, they bring it back in, and this game is going to come down to a call. I believe after one more rollout, my opponent's going to have to back-to-back body slams, so I have to make the read. Will they predict the catch? I say yes, so I'm staying on the field. They body slam, they go for the rollout, and we get the 50-50 right. All that stored Licky Licky energy gets removed from the field. In comes Sableye. It's a simul KO, but I still have my Sableye in the back, so we get the win. We get a very bad lead in the next match, leading Fortress into a Quagsire with a hat. Man, that Quagsire is best buddied as well. That is incredibly cool. Luckily, Celio is able to outpace here, so I make the serve before they make a potential Stone Edge, and I decide that I absolutely will be respecting the damage. My opponent baits me with Aqua Tail. That's really not ideal, and now they send out Togekiss. This is not really an answer to Celio. I tried to throw on 6 there, but unfortunately the game forced an overtap into me throwing on 7, which then played to a CMP tie that I did not win. If my opponent no shields the body slam, I can just farm down, but they put up a shield. They want to hold this energy. They now have the Aura Sphere. I have to preserve the Celio at all costs. So I'm going to pivot and send in the Sableye. Sableye gonna try for a Shadow Claw down. I can't quite get there, but if they're running the normal Aura Sphere and Psyshock, then they're completely walled. They go for the Aura Sphere. They actually go for Aura Sphere number 2. So they end up wasting all of their energy on the Sableye, and this is a big swing of momentum to me. In the back is Firo, and man, my opponent just did absolutely nothing for Shadow Celio on this team. Firo takes huge damage from the foul play, and I'm going to send in the Fortress. My opponent pivots out, they set at the Quagsire. I can't really afford to send in the Celio when I'm so far behind, so I just stayed with the Fortress and wait for them to throw. Aqua Tail is going to land, and now I pivot into the Celio. I'm just looking for whatever damage that I can possibly get. They're going to have to fire off an entire Stone Edge to take the knockout, and when they do, I can now build it to the back-to-back Sand Tombs, and Sand Tombs should finally be enough to secure the KO. Quagsire gets knocked out, back in comes the Firo. It's a charge attack priority tie, but I'm the regular Fortress. I'm always going to survive. They go for the Drill Peck. Fortress hangs on. That game did get a little bit scary at the end. My opponent's energy management with the Quagsire was very good, but luckily we had just enough HP remaining on the Fortress to still get the win. Dream lead in the next match, Old Switch Fortress into Shadow Celio. My opponent's going to save switch into Licky Licky, and Licky Licky save switches where you don't immediately answer with Sableye can get a little bit uncomfortable. I decide that I'm going to tank the Shadow Ball, debuff them before I eventually decide to pivot out into the Sableye. So far, my Sableye is extremely safe into their team. The Celio's not going to want to see it, and the Licky Licky's not going to want to see it either. I send it the Sableye. They're already debuffed because of the Rock Tomb, so I'm more than happy to take this damage and just look to overfarm as much as I can. So I'm going to be CMP tying here, Drain Punch to the Shadow Ball, and Drain Punch will be delivering the knockout if they no shield. They're going to let it go. If they bring back in the Celio, then I can boost up my defense once again. They do bring back in the Celio, and now I'm moving my defense up to +2. I'm going to be a very difficult Pokemon to remove from the field of play here. My opponent's going to have to go for the Surf, and I'm just going to catch the Surf onto my own Celio. This way I save the Sableye for later. Surf, not going to do much there. In the back is Shadow Dusknoir. Shadow Dusknoir is a very scary Pokemon to see, especially when you don't have a lot of HP remaining. And my Sableye and my Celio are both very, very low. I decide that the bait is just simply too risky here, so I fire off the Surf. My opponent will put up the shield. I'm going to try and make it to the Surf, and I'm able to just get there. Celio hanging on. That's the rank 1 Celio difference. We get the final shield. And now the fact that my Sableye is only 1 away from the foul play means that I should win the game. I can put up the shield. I now have the foul play. I'm just going to undertap it. Even if they catch, the foul play is still going to be knocking out the Celio. And I think I'm healthy enough to survive an Astonish. Back in comes the Dusknoir. We live the Astonish. It's a simul KO, but I still have the Fortress in the back, so the game will end in a win. We get a blast from the past in the next match. Fortress into Dusclops. I haven't seen a Dusclops in the Go Battle League in quite some time, but what I do remember is it never really hits very hard neutrally. So I tank the Shadow Punch, pivot into the Shadow Celio, and that's going to be luring out a Shadow Primeape. Shadow Primeape is not a strong counter answer to the Shadow Celio. They can fire off the Rage Fist and win charge attack priority, but I can go for the Body Slam bait, and even if they no shield, the Body Slam does so much damage that I could farm down after. They end up shielding, but now I can make another Body Slam. Shadow Celio is just completely running away with the game. I'm able to get both shields, Then I can just send to the fortress. I have the sand tomb loaded. That's going to force my opponent to throw on CMP. And then once they do, I just have a 2-0 shield Shadow Sableye. At this point, my lose con would be my opponent having a Wigglytuff in the back. If they have Wigglytuff, they just have me beat. But if they don't, then I'm probably winning the game with Sableye. In comes Sableye. My opponent clearly did not have a Wigglytuff, as they will resign the match. Hopping into the final match, we pick up a very bad lead Voltage Fortress into Shadow Quagsire. The Quagsire leads were definitely out today, and while it is a pretty bad matchup, this team does usually have a pretty good win rate into Quagsire leads. They stay into Aqua Tail, they send in Altaria, and this is basically the worst case scenario. I don't think I have enough damage with the Shadow Sableye to pick up the knockout here with the second foul play. And if I get a fully farmed down, then I'm going to be taking huge damage on whatever I bring in. Either a Sky Attack on Celio or getting one shot with a Flamethrower on my Fortress. I decide to send in the Celio. Opponent overfarms. I guess they weren't expecting the 2-turn Powder Snow user to come in, and we snipe them down and deny the energy. In the back is Gourgeist, and unfortunately, I still feel like I'm in a very rough spot. My Powder Snows are shredding through the Gourgeist, but unfortunately, I don't have a lot of charge attack pressure here. I'm going to farm up, fire off the Surf. Surf will not take the knockout, and my opponent should be able to undertap the Seed Bomb. I'm going to go for the catch. I send in the Fortress. They wait the turn. Oh my goodness. Great patience from my opponent, and they send back in the Quagsire to the Fortress. But by waiting the turn, they did give Fortress an energy head start. And the Quagsire has already taken some damage throughout the course of this game. So even though my first Sand Tomb doesn't do a lot, suddenly my Volt Switches start to feel threatening. I can go for another Sand Tomb. Now they're going to be at -2 defense. They're going to have to start putting up shields, as suddenly a matchup that is so dominant for Quagsire does not feel nearly as strong. I can even live in Aqua Tail here. I should be able to hang on. They Stone Edge to take the knockout, and I bring back in the Celio. Celio will fire off the Body Slam. This is going to be pressuring the final shield away from my opponent. I know they have Stone Edge. They threw the Stone Edge to the Fortress, and I think Stone Edge will do more than a Seed Bomb. So I put up the shield. There's the combo play. They fire off the Seed Bomb. I have to hope I can survive this. Seed Bomb lands. Celio survives. I get the farm down, and against all odds, we survive and get the win. This team has been so much fun to play. I do want to give a big shout out to Lyle Jeffs, because Lyle, I actually played him in GBL, and he was running this team. And that was when I was kind of trying a few teams that didn't end up working out super well, so I ended up trying this team, and this team has been really consistent over the past few days. I don't think I've had a single negative set with this team yet. I do think there are some matchups and learning how to play them that can be very beneficial for this team. Like versus Clodsire leads, typically, I'll just stay in with the Fortress and I won't throw energy. I'll just farm up, wait for them to Earthquake, and then bank the energy and pivot into the Shadow Celio. Most Clodsire lead teams don't have a great answer to a Shadow Celio up energy. Very frequently, it's something like a Feraligatr and a Dark Flyer in the back, and neither one of those really likes dealing with the Celio up energy. The reason why I don't throw the energy on the Fortress is because I feel that firing off Sand Tombs and debuffing them just to pivot out is kind of nonsensical. I would rather have the ability to ramp up my damage later in the game. But I think outside of that, I covered most of the lead matchups in this video. The Clodsire lead one, where I ended up winning because of that strategy. Unfortunately, I only recorded like the last half of that battle. I forgot to turn on my recording halfway through, so I didn't get footage of that one, but I still did want to describe that lead, as I felt like that was a situation that could be very beneficial to people who see that lead matchup. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching today's video, please do help support the channel by leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And an extra special thank you, as always, to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide to the channel is sincerely appreciated. So thank you guys so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.